How many of you know when and where the largest mass hanging in United States history occurred? It was December 26, 1862, in Mankato, Minnesota, and it's part of the history that forms the basis for my AP English Language and Composition unit. I am standing on a bluff over the Mississippi River, about a half-mile north of the spot where the Minnesota River flows in. For the Dakota, this convergence of rivers is the site of their creation, their most sacred site. While from this vantage point, this view is peaceful, much has changed since the Dakota were forcibly removed from Minnesota after the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862. Their sacred spot is flanked by two interstates and an international airport, and just a few miles upstream looms the skyline of Minneapolis. Hastily negotiated treaties forced the Dakota onto ever-dwindling plots of land, and their frustration with this loss of land, unfulfilled treaty bargains, and forced assimilation finally erupted in the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862. At the end of the hostilities, Minnesota Governor Alexander Ramsey declared the Sioux Indians of Minnesota must be exterminated or driven forever beyond the borders of the state. He oversaw the mass execution of 38 Dakota warriors and deported over 300 more male Dakota prisoners to Iowa. More than 1,700 elders, women, and children were removed to a concentration camp on the Mississippi, where hundreds died during the winter less than a mile away from their sacred site of creation. For most students, their first version of Minnesota history comes here at Fort Snelling, whereas elementary students, they come to find out how soldiers did laundry in the 1820s, or made toast, or fired their muskets. We're trying to introduce them to other perspectives on that Minnesota history and help them to develop and articulate their own perspective on that history. The central argument students will read in the unit is a book by Wazia Taween, a Dakota historian, in which she uses the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide to evaluate the treatment of the Dakota by the state of Minnesota. After reading several other texts, viewing some videos, interviewing historians and Dakota elders, and visiting some important historic sites, the students will write their own essay answering the questions, what land reparations, if any, should the Dakota receive from the state of Minnesota? As an extension of their learning, students will work in groups to research the situation of another indigenous people in a different part of the world and compare and contrast their situation with that of the Dakota.